Well, states are continuing to fight back against what some are calling federal overreach. The latest one is Montana, the Big Sky State. On Friday, Governor Greg Gianforte signed a bill nullifying federal gun bans. According to the Associated Press, the bill says that local and state authorities cannot enforce federal bans on guns, ammunition, and magazines. It also reportedly prohibits state funding from being used to uphold any sort of gun ban that might come from the federal government. All right, here he is. Let's bring him in. I want to bring in America's Constitution Coach, Victory News contributor Rick Green. Rick, there's so much there that's real, but it sounds absolutely absurd. Where do we start?
Well, I almost came on with a mask on because I was afraid I might catch some optimism from you guys, some of this idea that the Lord is still in control. I was afraid if I could catch COVID through a Zoom call, I might could catch some. Anyway, listen, I love you guys. I love your program. I love how you take all the things that are bad in the country. You have to report that, but then you also report the good and you remind people of the things that they can do. So I love the fact that you closed out that segment with the good news out of Alabama and Montana both. There's a lot of great things happening at the local and state level. I realize there's some horrible things happening at the federal level, and we've got to pay attention to that. And we've got to fight back and push on that. But I love the fact that you highlighted Montana and Alabama, and then we see that there's still some common sense out there. There's still some folks that actually don't want men competing in female sports, and you even had a governor and a legislature in Alabama willing to say no to that.
So that's where it's going to change, though, isn't it? It's going to have to change, not from the federal level. We can't change anything there right now, but at the state level. So you're exactly right on that. Let's go to this mayor in Portland now that wants you to turn people in, but not do it confrontationally. And he wants you to take pictures of people's faces, but they all have masks on. Rick, but we're supposed to take a picture of their faces. This is the same guy that blamed everything on Trump. This is the same guy that participated in the protest himself. I wonder what the epiphany was that caused him to wake up.
Yeah, I'm so glad you pointed that out, Greg, that, we cannot forget the very people that caused the problem by not enforcing the rule of law, by not preventing these riots and the looting and Chaz and all of the craziness that's happened over the last year, that even now they think that we have short enough memories that they can act like suddenly they're the people that are for rule of law and order, and then call on you to be the ones to enforce that on your neighbors when they haven't backed you up in the past when you tried to defend yourself. So these are the typical liberal politicians that got us in this mess, same as the Minneapolis mayor. I just hope that people will be reminded of who got us in the mess and not suddenly have a Stockholm syndrome, where you're praising your captor because they might actually let you out to get some sunshine for a little while. We need to remember who has been against liberty and who has been for liberty. Thank the good Lord for people like Senator Rand Paul pointing out the insanity of what that continues to be made out to be the new normal that we're all going to live under. I thank God for sane voices out there from Victory Channel right here, but also some of the good folks like Senator Rand Paul as well.
Well, Rick, speaking of a new normal, which I hope this is not a new normal, we've got the declaration of emergency there in North Carolina because of that police shooting. We've got this anti-police rhetoric that we've dealt with in this country now for quite some time, coming from really one side of the aisle. And it occurred to me that proportionally, there are way many more corrupt politicians and anti-American politicians than there are bad police officers. Would you agree with that?
No doubt about it. And what I can guarantee you, I don't know anything about this shooting in North Carolina yet. I haven't seen the video footage. I hope they do release it publicly. Whether it turns out to be a justified shooting or possibly not a justified shooting, which would be extremely, extremely rare. Either way, the narrative is already being set. We're already hearing them say, I was trying to grab some headlines and take a look at it right before we went on. They're already beginning to say that this is an example of what happens all the time. That is a lie. It is very rare that we have an unjustified shooting in America by a police officer. Extremely rare, considering the 40 million interactions every year. So you're 100% right. We need to prevent them from being able to push that narrative on people and tell that lie. Right now, there are a lot of Americans that believe that you a 50-50 chance, a black person has a 50-50 chance of getting pulled over and ended up getting shot. I mean, the numbers are just, it boggles the mind how much they bought the exaggerated lies out there, and that's got to stop. We need to make sure that we prosecute when there is an unjustified shooting or an unjustified death at the hands of police. But we need to remind people how extremely, extremely rare that is.
That, and not only that, but also follow the science with other things from the federal government. We have not, this news organization has not seen the video yet. It will be released this week. But I do want to go back to one line that stood out to me in this story. As reported, the fatal shooting of Andrew Brown Jr. after police executed a search warrant. So they had gotten a warrant from a judge for something. So we'll wait to see when we see that footage. Excellent point.
Greg, I was just going to add to that, let's not forget what these officers face every time they walk up to a car, every time they knock on that door, how many times officers are killed every year in the line of duty where they have a split second to be able to respond, and often they're ambushed where they have no time to respond. So that just needs to be kept in mind when we have to deal with these kind of situations.
Absolutely true. Mike Garofalo, back to you.
Greg, a big day when it comes to congressional seats and the Electoral College. The Census Bureau says today that it will be releasing the numbers used for determining how many each state get, and it has. The numbers are almost 4 months later than planned due to delays caused by the pandemic and anomalies discovered in the data as the numbers were being crunched. The numbers show how many residents each state has gained or lost over the past decade, and they determine how many of the 435 seats in the House of Representatives, how they are divided. And let me give you the latest numbers that just came out. According to the New York Post, which is sourcing, of course, the U.S. Census Bureau, New York State lost 1 seat. The other states to lose 1 include California, high taxes, Illinois, Michigan, Ohio, Pennsylvania, West Virginia. Now, 5 states gained 1 seat. They include Florida, Colorado, Montana, North Carolina, as well as Oregon. And the big state of Texas gained 2 seats. So interesting news. You're going to hear a lot more about that, I'm sure, as this day progresses. All right, in other news, the judge overseeing the Arizona audit is being forced to recuse himself. The judge was forced to make that move after Democrats essentially shopped around for a new lawyer, choosing Christopher Viscovich, who used to intern for Maricopa County Superior Court Judge Christopher Corey. A new judge will be assigned to the case, we are told. A court spokesman said Sunday that more information should be available at some point today on whether the hearing will proceed and how that's going to play out. The audit is a hand recount, as you may know, of all 2.1 million ballots cast in 2020, an examination of the ballot, the counting machines, and follow-up interviews with voters themselves. In a surprising move, Senators Elizabeth Warren and Dick Durbin of Illinois, Warren, of course, of Massachusetts, they're standing up for the rights of those involved in the January 6th Capitol riots. Both Warren and Durbin have expressed frustrations with reports that state some of the rioters have been held in solitary confinement while under investigation. Warren, from Massachusetts, Democrat, said that while some limited uses of the solitary confinement are justified, she is worried that law enforcement officials are deploying it to punish the defendants or to break them so that they will cooperate. Dick Durbin, who has long sought to eradicate solitary confinement and that such conditions should be a rare exception for accused insurrectionists or any other prisoners for that matter. Well, Defense Secretary Lloyd Austin has decided to keep an aircraft carrier in the Middle East to help provide protection for American and coalition troops during their planned withdrawal from Afghanistan in the coming weeks. The Pentagon made that announcement on Friday, saying Austin approved an extension of the USS Dwight D. Eisenhower's deployment in the Middle East for a period of time. He also said 2 U.S. Air Force B-52 bombers have arrived in the region as part of the pre-pullout bolstering of security, which he called a prudent precaution. The move backs up the Pentagon's officials' public assurances that U.S. forces will be prepared to meet whatever resistance the Taliban might present during the withdrawal of more than 10,000 U.S. and coalition troops, starting, as we know, on May 1st. About 2,500 to 3,500 of those 10,000 troops are American. Greg, back to you.
All right, I want to throw it back now to Rick Green. Rick, as we look at some of these things, the top story in there is the census. The vast migration that we've been experiencing here in Texas as people have been moving here and to Florida, and they're leaving what's typically the Rust Belt states. But point to this, California, for the first time in their history, loses a congressional seat. What does that mean?
You know, Greg, I'm out here in Nevada right now doing one of our constitutional defense courses, and the number one question I've gotten so far is not a question about the Constitution, which is typically what happens. No, the number one question is, Rick, which county in Texas should I move to? I'm leaving California. I'm leaving Washington, Oregon. It's unbelievable. I mean, and those numbers bear it out. And don't forget, those numbers are going to be, 15 months old. So imagine all of the folks that have moved in the last year as well. People are voting with their feet. They're looking for states that are lower taxes, lower regulation, less tyranny. The things that they've seen happen over the last year have made them realize I've got to find a place where people respect the Constitution. So the numbers are actually pretty good for conservative states. It's not as big as I thought it would be, which I'm a little concerned with how long the numbers were put off before they finally released them, and some of the decisions that were lost to the Supreme Court. I think that did influence it in a negative way, but it was still good. 2 for Texas, 1 for some of these other conservative states. That means a different Congress, right? That means that you're going to have members of Congress elected from more conservative states, and it also means a different electoral college, as Mike led with.
Right. And so now I'm not as optimistic as you, because gerrymandering is a big deal. When this gets to the state houses, including Texas, they're going to have to figure out where these new congressional districts will be. Will they be in Houston? Will they be in Dallas? Where will they be? That's the big fight now at the state level, is it not?
And it'll be huge. And unfortunately, Greg, it's going to end up in the courts no matter what. And it could actually delay here in Texas, in our home state. It could delay the primaries to be as late as July or August instead of like they are normally in March. If you don't mind me commenting on one of the other stories, I got to say that the deal with Senator Durbin and Elizabeth Warren, how did we get to a place where it has to be 2 of our most left-wing senators that are standing up for the people that have been arrested after the January 6th event at the Capitol, and the fact that they are not receiving bail? This has got to be known by the American people. People that have been accused of trespassing. I'm not talking about the ones that broke glass and those kind of things. Some of these people have been arrested that didn't do anything wrong, and they are being refused bail while we are letting people out that are murderers, that have done violent acts. We're letting them out without bail. That's the 2-tiered system that's happening right now, and we've got to wake up to that and realize that that's not blind justice, that's not equal justice. And a lot of these people that were arrested for what happened on January 6th. They're facing beatings in prison. There's horrible things happening right now, and the American people need to know about it.
That's absolutely true. And no one even really barely covered the Oklahoma riots or takeover at the Oklahoma House last week. Concerning, back to your point, and then I'll pitch it to Tim here, this move of people moving out. If the capital gains tax the president is proposing happens, Texans, Californians and New Yorkers, you're going to be paying over 50% in your taxes. Tim?
Well, this next story comes out of Washington, D.C., and you have to wonder what 2 police officers in that city were thinking, or maybe they weren't thinking at all. Fox 5 in D.C. is reporting that 2 Washington, D.C. officers crashed and totaled their police vehicles while drag racing on duty last week. The report says the cops from the Metropolitan Police Department raced each other on Thursday at about 5 p.m. on Anacostia Avenue near Kenilworth Park, hitting speeds of at least 60 miles an hour. In an internal email obtained by local media, a commander reportedly says of the officers' actions, quote, "Yesterday, 2 6D scout cars were totaled because officers decided that instead of fighting crime, patrolling their beats, or engaging in the community, they decided to drag race each other on Anacostia Avenue at 5 p.m. in the evening." Greg, no report of who won, actually.
Well, I was wondering, maybe it was Talladega and D.C. In a move welcomed by communities of faith, the state of New Mexico will once again allow persons in church services at full capacity. Governor Michelle Grisham made the decision to completely reopen churches and houses of worship in New Mexico. It's unlikely it was influenced by the Supreme Court's ruling earlier this month that California couldn't enforce pandemic-related restrictions on places of worship, prayer meetings, Bible studies, and other affiliated events. Various religious groups said they were pleased with this decision. Mike, over to you.
Greg, Vice President Kamala Harris will speak to the United Nations members today for the second time since taking office. She is expected to say how now is the time for global leaders to begin putting the serious work into how they will respond not to this global pandemic, but to the next global pandemic. The virtual address will come as the United States makes progress on vaccinating the public. In addition, the Biden administration marks a big day this week. It will reach its 100 days in office this week, and President Joe Biden will finally address Congress. That's going to happen on Wednesday. He is expected to highlight how his administration has responded to the worst public health crisis in the U.S. in more than a century. And back to the vice president at the UN today. She will broadly outline how the administration thinks the U.S. and other nations should consider focusing their attention on everything from accessibility to health systems to investing in science to health workers, as well as vaccine and test manufacturing of those vaccines. The search is on for a man caught on camera in New York City kicking an Asian man in the head repeatedly. New York City police say the attack happened late Friday in East Harlem, and they have released a picture of the suspect right there. He is accused of throwing a 61-year-old Chinese immigrant, Yao Pan Ma, to the street late Friday and kicking him in the head at least 6 times before stalking away. At last report, Ma, who was reportedly collecting aluminum cans after losing his job, is said to be in serious but stable condition. A large percentage of Republicans are questioning this decision made by the jury in last week's Derek Chauvin murder trial. According to a CBS News YouGov poll, 46% say they believe former Minneapolis police officer Derek Chauvin was wrongly convicted for the murder of George Floyd. The poll found that 10% of Democrats came to that same conclusion. Overall, however, 75% of respondents said they felt the jury reached the correct verdict. Well, NASA is still shooting for the moon and hoping to land an astronaut there by the year 2024. At least that's what former Florida Senator and Joe Biden's choice to head NASA, Bill Nelson, had to say this past week. Now, the Senate held a confirmation hearing for Nelson on Wednesday, which included questions about NASA's recent award of $2.9 billion to SpaceX to provide a human lunar lander. Greg, back to you.
All right, several things that are very interesting. Kamala Harris will be going to the United Nations. Now, I didn't understand if that was virtual or if it was in person. It seems like she hasn't gone to the border yet. I was listening about the United Nations. I'll bring Rick Green here in a minute. Mike, I want to come back to you first on this. I was listening to where the United Nations has been added to the women's committees there in the United Nations, which was shocking to me on the treatment of women, that we're going to bring Iran in here. You have a story as well on Iran.
Right. Fox News is reporting, this is just a couple hours old, and you're going to be hearing a lot about this, I would gather. It is reporting that the Iranian foreign minister claimed in a recently leaked audio tape that when John Kerry, who was then serving as Secretary of State, so we're going back to the Obama administration, keep in mind, informed him, this is John Kerry informing the Iranian foreign minister of more than 200 Israeli operations taking place in the country of Syria. And so this is just coming out right now. Apparently there's a leaked audio that came out regarding that Iranian foreign minister. So Greg, I'm going to throw it to you, but obviously there's a lot more that's going to come out about this, but this is a big deal considering how much of an ally Israel is to the United States. It absolutely is. It's
the only democracy in the Middle East, and I want to bring Rick Green in this. Rick, that's, my opinion, treasonous.
I would agree with you completely, and this is one of the reasons that so many in Israel were rooting for Donald Trump to be reelected. They knew what they were dealing with in the Democrat Party that has not been a friend to Israel and undermined things that Israel has done for years. And Donald Trump did the opposite. He was a great friend to Israel. The Trump administration worked very hard to bring peace to the Middle East, historic agreements with Muslim nations. It was incredible. And unfortunately, we still have John Kerry now back on the scene and part of the Biden administration. And this should be an embarrassment to John Kerry. It should be an embarrassment to the Obama-Biden administration from last time. And he should be, at the very least, fired from the Biden administration now. But I agree with you. Charges should be brought if this is proven to be true.
Yeah, it's chilling to see that. Israel is such a free place. More women will fly an F-16 fighter jet today in Israel than women will drive cars in Saudi Arabia or in Iran. Just things to think about. Rick, as we go on these stories, we were talking about COVID and some of these things a little bit earlier. I want to show we say follow the science, and I believe in that. Let me show you the science a few years back. Can I show you a slide on the screen? These were actual advertising ads. Look at this. This is the smooth taste expectant mothers crave. That's a cigarette ad for expectant mothers. Now, if we're following the science, we've got to follow the science, don't we not? So they've been wrong before, Rick.
Oh, they've been wrong so many times. I remember it was a flat Earth world until the science was finally proven, and everybody had to pay attention to the actual science instead of the pseudoscience. We've certainly experienced that this year. I just want to say, quick, praise the Lord for New Mexico churches now being able to be opened up. We're starting to get more and more good news. It doesn't mean we forget, again, what happened in the past and why the governor would have shut down those church services in the first place. But thankfully, there's starting to be a kink in the armor, if you will, of all of the, I call it COVID fascism. I believe that's what it's been for the last year. But all of a sudden, you're starting to see things loosen up and not just have a few of us out there screaming and saying, hey, let's look at the constitutional rights and let's look at the science. More and more people are beginning to pay attention.
Yeah, thank you, Rick Green, for being with us, our special guest. Thank you for watching. This Wednesday night, we are going to carry the coverage of the president's speech to the joint session of Congress and the Republican response from Senator Scott. Join us then, and we'll have the expert analysis for you. God bless you. Have a great day. We'll see you later. Bye-bye.
God bless.